What's going on, people? It's your boy Tone, back with another video. Listen, we got Thomas Sowell versus Trevor Noah, man. Now, I know about Trevor Noah, so I can get into this one a little bit more. They're talking about slavery and reparations, and I'm gonna guess here they're gonna give their own points of view, or Trevor's gonna argue against Thomas's point of view. So let's see how this plays out, you guys. Let's go.
So to your question, I think you have to understand what the word reparations means first. So reparations, you are repairing something that you have broken. You are paying for something that you were supposed to pay for. I'm not saying that there aren't people living in America today who are suffering and are going through pain and strife because of what's happening when it comes to, machines taking jobs, factories becoming industrialized, etc. But reparations is a specific conversation about a specific time in America, and that is black people were slaves.
Article that got a lot of attention in The Atlantic a couple of years ago called The Case for Reparations by Ta-Nehisi Coates. Quote, "White supremacy is a force so fundamental to America that it is difficult to imagine the country without it. Reparations is the price we must pay to see ourselves squarely." Close quote. And Tom Sowell, who actually saw Jim Crow with his own eyes and experienced it, responds how?
It would be nice to know his evidence for what he said, just to be old-fashioned about it. No, it was a rotten system.
He always comes correct, man. 100%.
But I don't know how we get from that to reparations. I mean, what we see in the United States in terms of the bad things, you see all around the world. If you were to give reparations to everyone whose ancestors had been slaves, I suspect that you would have to give reparations to more than half the entire population of the globe. Slavery was not confined to one set of races. I suspect that most of the people who were either slaves or slave owners around the world were neither white nor black. I mean, this was a universal curse of the human species.
Africa, the Middle East, Asia, slavery took place everywhere.
And it continued elsewhere long after it was abolished in the Western countries.
Right.
You know what I mean? I've even heard people say like, oh, but there were some of the Irish who were indentured. Like, yeah, slavery. Look at the numbers, look at the time, look at the level of work. You could not work toward your freedom. For most black people in America, this was a time when you lived and died as a slave. And so that's what reparations is about.
The other thing, I have a slight sidebar on the history of slavery. The history of slavery existed all over the world for thousands of years, among all sorts of people, as far back as the history of the human species goes. It's one of many evils that the left tries to localize, when in fact it is a universal evil. But more than that, as much as slavery is repudiated around the world today, prior to the 18th century, I know of no serious effort to abolish the institution anywhere. Anywhere.
Not in Africa, not in the Arabian
world. Not
in
Africa in the 21st century. When Adam Smith wrote in 1776 that the only place in the world where slavery had been abolished completely was Western Europe. And so this was
as late as the year this country was founded.
Yes. And so the idea that this is something that the United States had that nobody else had, or the other countries that didn't have, it's been estimated that there are more slaves in India than in the entire Western Hemisphere. And that's before and after Columbus got here.
Right.
And so I hear what you're saying, but I think that's a completely separate conversation that needs to be had about the...
So I'm gonna pause it real quick. I'm gonna give you guys a chance to comment down below. So far, I mean, they're both making pretty good cases. I think Trevor Noah is saying, hey, for this specific time, for these 300 years, slaves did not have the ability to have income and to save money, to build things, and to, pass it down. And most importantly, pass down this generational wealth to, well, as much wealth as you can get as a slave, to the next generation. So I see what Trevor's saying, but I also see where Thomas is coming from. This is interesting. Comment down below your opinion. I would love to read it. Let's go.
Now, because if you are not careful, what you then do is you combine everybody's suffering into the same bowl, and you make it seem like all injustices have the same weighting, and they don't. Just like crimes. You know, theft isn't the same as murder. We don't try them the same way. And as much as there is a white person who's suffering today, I feel for anybody who's suffering, because I know what it's like to be poor. I know what it's like to suffer. I didn't come from a wealthy family. We struggled when I was growing up.
Right.
But I also understand that there are levels of that suffering, you know? And so sometimes white people, it does block a white person, because you go, white privilege, and a person goes, I'm poor and I'm white. Where's the privilege? You know, white people are like, I wish I could activate my white privilege. I wish I could do it right now. White privilege! Give me something. I get that. I get that. Trust me, I get it.
He's crazy.
It is hard to accept that you have benefits because of the color of your skin if you cannot see the benefits that you have.
The book that I'm writing now, I discovered this is true not only in the United States, it's true in England, and the situation is wholly different. And yet, if you read the data, for example, from London, the educational tests and so forth, you see that there, immigrants from Africa pass this test they have. I'm talking about low-income people now. Nearly 60% of the time. Blacks from the Caribbean, like 50%, so on. Native-born whites in the same low-income bracket pass this test 30% of the time. And it's the same thing. The foreign people come in, they haven't had generations of being steeped in the welfare state vision, the vision of grievances, victimology, and resentments, the idea that there are enemies out there dedicated to keeping you down. That's the message that's been pumped into the head of the white lower class in Britain, and that's the image that's been pumped into the black low-income people in the United States, and the results are the same in both cases.
But the thing I try to explain to a person is, think of it more like golf. Don't think of it as privilege, then think of it like a handicap, right? In golf, they acknowledge that you are in a position where you need so many advantages to be competitive in the game.
Is that we ought not to be doing this?
You know, there are various laws and policies that benefit one group at the expense of another. But I think affirmative action has the distinction of being one that it harms everybody, though in different ways. And so there's a lot of evidence that there are black kids who have all the qualifications to be successes in college, who nevertheless are failures because they are systematically mismatched with institutions whose standards they don't meet, even though they may meet the standards of 80 or 90% of the colleges in America. I remember, first aware of this when I was teaching at Cornell, and I found that half the black students at Cornell were on some kind of academic probation. And so I went over to the administration building and looked up the SATs of these students. The average black student at Cornell at that time scored at the 75th percentile.
Which is pretty darn good.
Yes. And so that means that in most colleges in this country, they would have no trouble, and many of them would be on the dean's list. But at Cornell, the average liberal arts student at that time was in the 99th percentile. And when you're teaching the students like that, you teach at a pace that most people of any race cannot keep up with. And it was always complained that I was assigning all kinds of reading. But heck, I'm teaching kids who are in the top 1%. They can keep up with the reading that I'm assigning.
So Cornell was taking very talented black kids and spending 4 years teaching them to feel inadequate.
Yes, and succeeding at that.
Right? So what they say is you have a handicap of 15, so that means like you're going to be hitting from this tee and you get more chances to get the ball in because we understand the position you're in. And if you're a black person in America, from slavery, from day one.
Pondering all this, I noticed something, a column that you wrote, this is a couple of years ago, in which you rebutted Nicholas Kristof of the New York Times. And Kristof had ascribed the gaps between African Americans and whites in America, gaps in wealth, gaps in educational achievement, the usual gaps, to, and this is a quotation from Kristof, to the lingering effects of slavery, close quote.
Oh, yes.
And here's Tom Sowell, quote, if we wanted to be serious about evidence,
he remembers,
we might compare where blacks stood 100 years after the end of slavery with where they stood after 30 years of the liberal welfare state. In other words, we could compare hard evidence on the legacy of slavery with hard evidence on the legacy of liberals, close quote. And
the number of injustices that have held black people back in America amount to an insurmountable, like you look at black people's freedom, you look at black people's land, just land alone. The amount of wealth you can acquire over time if you own land is exponential, because you have the land, you have the fact that you can borrow based on the land, you have the fact that you can use the money that you have borrowed to grow more wealth, you can use it to grow your family's wealth. Just taking that away from black people alone.
Right, right. And also, if you think you've been wronged, your recourse might also be more likely to politics, to try to redress this whole redistribution,
yes. Oh, yes.
rather than hit the books, acquire the skills, get the job.
But the other thing too, one of my favorite statistic in there is that the poverty rate among blacks as a whole is 22%. Among whites as a whole is 11%, and among black married couples is 7.5%.
So
that was a bar.
And it's been and black married couples have never had a poverty rate as high as 10% in any year since 1994.
All right.
That was a heavy bar right
so
there.
to the cry, what is to be done? Tom Sowell answers.
It's been done.
Get an education, get married, have kids after you get married. That's sort of the answer, right?
Well, yes, and the things that work for other people tend to work pretty generally.
All right.
Is crippling them. And so you combine that with slavery, and then you look at Jim Crow laws. You didn't let black people in America live in the areas that they wanted to live in. They couldn't get loans from the banks that they wanted to get loans from. And then on top of that, when they started getting the loans from American banks were found to be giving them higher interest rates, when in fact they were the same risk as many of the other races that they were giving loans to. So when you combine all of those things, I think it's safe to say that black Americans have a conversation that they need to be having with the United States. Doesn't involve me, doesn't involve white people, it's like, yo, American government, meet the black people. That's it. Have that conversation.
In terms of political leaders, all the incentives politically are for black leaders to blame all problems in the black community on the larger society. And that enables them to take on the role of being the defender of the black community against enemies, which in turn creates the situation in which many blacks don't feel that anything that they do is going to help themselves unless it's done politically as a group. That there's no point. I mean, why would you, if you believe what they say, why would you want to knock yourself out in the school knowing that the man is not going to let you get anywhere? One of the most pathetic things I heard in recent years was a young black man saying that, at one point he thought he would join the Air Force and become a pilot. And then he says he realized that the white man is not going to let a black man become a pilot. And he was saying this decades after the Tennessee Airmen had established their reputation in combat in Europe. But the hopelessness is one of the big products of the race industry. That you have no chance. I remember giving a talk at Marquette, and at the end of the talk, among the questions that was asked, a young black man got up and he said, "Even though I am graduating from Marquette University, what hope is there for me?" And having gone through college when I was in the 50s, I don't remember any blacks saying that in the 1950s, when there was a lot more obstacles to overcome than there were when this guy is graduating from Marquette. But you have to produce that kind of feeling in order to serve the interests of those in the race industry.
Somewhere watching this interview,
he calls it the
there's
race
a young
hustlers.
Thomas Sowell. There's an African American who's smart and wants to do something with his life. It seems to me we've already got one piece of advice you'd offer to him is stay away from the races industry. Stay away from the what advice race hustlers. What advice would you give a young Thomas Sowell? How do you make something of yourself as an African American in America today?
The way anybody else would. You equip yourself with skills that people are willing to pay for.
All right, so that was Thomas Sowell versus Trevor Noah. Wasn't really versus, but we get it. On slavery and reparations. Listening to both their points, they both had valid points. Trevor was very specific about this is the time frame. These are the reasons why. And he gave the reasons inside of that as well. Blacks weren't allowed to own land for a point of time. Blacks couldn't save money, weren't allowed to make money, and those are all valid. Thomas Sowell's point of view was straight. Listen, man, if you want to make something out of yourself in this world, you can't keep looking for handouts. You can't keep looking for people to help you. You got to go out there, do what you got to do, take your butt to school, or do a trade. Get married, be a good man, and do what you got to do. And listen, man, it don't get much simpler than that, right? It really doesn't. And he's saying through that, you'll be able to, have enough wealth and money financially to be happy in America, and there's no need for reparations. So on this one, it's kind of tricky. I'm leaning more towards Thomas Sowell's point of view, as far as like, look, let's stop waiting for this handout. Let's stop making excuses. Yes, we've gone through slavery. Yes, we've gone through hardships. But we are here right now, and let's make the best out of what we have right now. We can go to college. We can go to any college we want in the world. We can travel to any country we want in the world. We can literally do anything we want to do in this world, man. And at this point in time, there's like no excuses for, failure. Or making excuses for somebody else. So Thomas Sowell, listen, man. When I first started doing this, I was like, yo, where should I start? And I caught a lot of grief by even trying to do Thomas Sowell from people around me. Like, nah, don't do that guy. He's conservative, da-da-da-da. And a lot of my family was telling me not to do him because they didn't like him, you know what I mean? Personally. And I kind of wanted to see for myself his points of views and the way how he comes to his conclusions, man. And you cannot knock it, bro. You really can't knock it. He comes with all stats, all statistics. He leaves emotions out of it. And if he's wrong, like he said right here in this interview, let's compare the numbers. And if I'm wrong, show me the stats proving I'm wrong. He's not one of those kind of guys, I'm right about everything. I'm that person, and what you're saying is incorrect. If he is incorrect, to me, he comes off as a person that, hey, if you bring me stats that show that my information is incorrect, let's get together and work on it. And again, these are the kind of conversations that need to be had, man. So shout out to my subscribers for recommending this one. Make sure you guys comment down below what you guys want to see next, because we are here for it, man. And until next time, you guys, peace.